Okay, good to go. So I'd just like to welcome everyone here tonight for the last of our series here tonight on our athletic development, or our fitness roadshow as we call it. So yeah, just as you can see on the front slide there, what we're going to be looking at tonight is our recovery and load monitoring. Okay, so myself and Malone are going to take you through it today, and there's a couple other staff there just to give us a hand with any questions, or if there is anything else they might be able to answer if we can. So that's good to go, Ian.
Yep, all good.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. So just start off. Okay. So what our learning outcomes are for the session ahead. Okay. So the first half, okay, is what I'm going to take, and that's what we're going to be doing is how to understand the reasons why we use recovery methods in the GAA. Okay, and how to best apply them. So I'm going to take you through for about 20-25 minutes at the start, covering that side of things, and Ian is going to come in then for the second half, and he's going to look at how to understand how to monitor training load and adjust training for optimal results. Okay, so the two are kind of heavily linked between each other, and they're going to be quite prevalent and important as we get back onto the pitch after a long spell away from training. So this is probably quite prevalent at the minute. Hopefully we'll be back on the pitch, I suppose, in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, if there's any questions throughout as we're going, don't be afraid to, you can put up your hand here, or you can, if you're not confident enough to put the mic on, you can write the question into the text box and we'll try and answer it best we can. Okay. Ian, next slide there. Okay, so like I said, I'm just going to take you through the recovery methods. Okay, so just to get a little bit of interaction at the start here. So question here, why is it important to recover? Okay, so just if you want to maybe make a point or two, if you don't want to say it in, you can just type it into the text box, and lads, if you want to shout it out to me there so I can see. Just give you a minute to write in anything you know. Okay, why is it important to recover? Okay, I can see a couple popping up there. Good. Okay, so avoid injury, yeah, injury prevention. Okay, so plenty on the injury side of things, like I kind of hit on earlier. That's going to play a huge factor when we get back onto the pitch after kind of a long spell, is I suppose trying to avoid injury. So definitely, yeah, an important one. Just give another couple of seconds if anyone else wants to throw in, if there's any other elements to it. Okay. Monitor development, yeah, good. Recover and be ready to perform. Okay, so that's a good one. Okay, it's the performance aspect as well as injury. Okay, so I suppose that's one main part, is trying to reduce our injuries. Okay, and trying to stay fit and healthy. Okay, but also trying to, I suppose, perform best we can between sessions. Okay, and games. So yeah, good feedback in there. So Ian, if you want to flick on, we'll just get going. Okay. So just what is recovery? Okay, so I suppose recovery occurs after training and games have taken place. Okay, so as soon as a game or a training session finishes, okay, that's where a recovery window opens. Okay, so that's kind of where we have to target and try best to prepare ourselves for the next time we hit the pitch or the gym. Okay, so the second one here, the quality of recovery will determine the amount of adaptation that occurs. Okay, so depending on what you're looking at here, okay, whether it be you're in the gym and you're trying to increase strength, okay, or whether you're out on the pitch and you're trying to increase your conditioning or your fitness, okay. So how well, okay, or the quality of recovery that you get in between sessions, okay, is going to determine the amount of adaptation or the benefit, okay, of the training that you do, okay. So the better the recovery, okay, the fitter, the stronger that you're going to be, okay. And just the last point here, okay, recovery aims to help athletes return to a normal physiological function, okay, in ways such as restore nutrients, energy stores, and reducing muscle soreness, okay. So as we go through the next couple of slides, okay, we're going to be showing you, or I'm going to be showing you how to, suppose, do this, returning to a normal physiological function, okay? There's also a psychological element to it, okay, that some of you might notice or have seen before, so I'll kind of touch on that as we get going on, okay? Okay, so next slide here is we're just going to look at what happens if you don't get sufficient recovery, okay, or if there's a lack of recovery, okay? So a lack of recovery can lead to a number of issues, okay? So the first one there being decreased performance. So like we had already, we had some of the comments coming in there, okay? One or two hit on the decreased performance, okay? So secondly, there is the increased chance of injury, okay? So they were kind of the two main ones that came in. So yeah, obviously both are very important, okay? So trying to stay on the pitch, okay, and reducing the chance of injury, okay, is obviously a huge one, but obviously trying to perform the best you can and trying to be successful, okay? Them two are going to link up hugely there. Another one that's probably less commonly known here is that it can depress immune function, okay? So the lack of recovery can lead to you getting quite, getting, I suppose, colds and flus and getting sick. So that's probably one that's not hugely associated. You probably think more of your decreased performance and your chance of injury, but yeah, it can lead to you getting sick, which obviously will have a knock-on effect in your day-to-day life as well as your sporting life, okay? And just the last one here, like I spoke about, there's psychological effects as well as physiological, okay? So stuff here such as lack of interest, okay, irritability, lack of concentration, just kind of bad form and temper and stuff like that as well. So we've probably kind of all seen that at some stage. And like I said, this goes on further than the football pitch, okay? So this can lead into your life, I suppose, due to your work or your college as well, that lack of interest, that lack of concentration and stuff like that, okay? So it's important for all aspects of life as well as sport that we kind of recover from these sessions. Okay, so this slide here, okay, is probably what I'll call one of our main pillars, our first main pillar, okay? So we're going to kind of focus on two main pillars tonight, and that's going to make up the bulk of our recovery, okay? So the first one here is our nutrition and hydration, okay? And I'll go on to the second one as we come to it. But what I mean by our two main pillars are, if we're not really nailing these two main pillars, okay, so first being our nutrition and hydration, and the second is sleep, okay? So we'll get to that as we go on. But if you don't really nail these two, that's kind of our 90 or 95% what our recovery is made up of, okay? So if we're not nailing them two, okay, you can do all the fancy massage and massage guns and cold water therapy, ice baths, foam roll and all that crack, okay? That's not going to be of any benefit, okay? So the focus of this here, okay, is going to be trying to nail our nutrition and hydration and our sleep, okay, first and foremost, before we kind of look at the smaller, the 2 and 3%, okay, of our other recovery methods. So just what I have here, okay, so there is strong evidence to suggest that nutrition and hydration play a large role in the recovery process, okay? So like I said, it's kind of our first main pillar. So nutrition and hydration can be practical, okay, and easy to improve, okay? So it's not going to, I suppose, cost a huge amount, okay? Obviously, you have to buy your food for the week, but just, I suppose, upskilling yourself to be able to create a good food environment and create good food and know what to cook and what is good, what should be putting into your body, okay? It's quite practical and it can be easy to improve, okay, compared to other methods. So just, I suppose, the third point here, okay, so eating a balanced diet with whole foods and minimizing refined foods will lead to the best results, okay? So look, I'm not going to get into too much, not going to be too specific as I go through here. I'm not going to be, I suppose, assigning how many grams of this and that you should be eating, okay? So I'm going to go for kind of a holistic kind of approach and general guidelines, okay? And I think that'll probably work best as of the minute. So just what I have there at the end, okay? So there probably is no scientific evidence behind this rule, but I just like it personally, and it's kind of the 80-20 rule, okay? So you kind of eat your good diet, your nutritious and wholesome food 80% of the time, okay? And then you get foods of your choice for the other 20%, okay? So that kind of links up to the third point there, being balanced, okay? Just trying to eat, I suppose, good for the bulk of the time, okay? You're 80% of the time, okay? And you can treat yourself, have that bit of balance, okay, for 20% of the time. It's not going to have that huge effect on you, okay? So it's just a rule I like. I don't know if there's any scientific evidence behind it, but yeah, it's pretty simple and straightforward to follow. So just go into more detail in the next couple of slides. Okay, so I'll just go into a little bit of information kind of behind nutrition, okay? So I'll just kind of go through some of our macronutrients that we have here. This is probably as detailed as we're going to get into it, but it's just important probably to have a little bit of an understanding of these, okay? So I suppose the first one I have there is protein, okay? So we see the examples below. So source of protein are your meat, fish, chicken, eggs, and your kind of dairy products, okay? And the reason they're important, okay, is they're the building blocks for muscle. They're needed for maintenance, growth and recovery, and during exercise to spare muscle breakdown, okay? So I suppose I'll go into a little bit more detail about when we should be, I suppose, taking protein and how much we should take, but yeah, that's kind of the first main macronutrient that's important, okay, to kind of understand. Leading on from that, okay, is our carbohydrates. So what we have is two types, okay. So your simple carbs, okay, or quick releases are known. So that's kind of your sugars, fruit juices, milk products, and your complex, okay. So your kind of gradual release, which is kind of your pasta, rice, grains, and potatoes, okay. And they provide the main energy source during exercise. So obviously, very important aspect of nutrition. So probably quite prevalent or important before exercise, but it plays its part, I suppose, post-exercise and in the recovery process as well. And I'll give you, I suppose, some recommendations as we get on to that. And then just at the end here, I just have fats, okay? So that provides energy for low intensity exercise, and sources are nuts, oils, and avocado, okay? So yeah, just important to kind of have an understanding and know what each of the three are, okay? And we'll just go on to the next slide, and I'll kind of give more recommendations on how to, I suppose, apply these into our diet. Okay, so like I said earlier, I'm not going to get too specific, okay, and, on, I suppose, the amount of grams of carbs or protein or fats that you should be eating in a day, or go and tracking your macronutrients or any of this. If people, I suppose, are interested in it, okay, they could contact any of us, or we could, I suppose, chat a little bit more about it. But just kind of in general terms, I feel like this is good, I suppose, especially, I suppose, in a younger team environment, okay. So just what I have here is portion sizes, okay. So I have two different infographics or pictures here. So yeah, they're pretty visual, and they kind of are what they are on it. So I suppose just on the one on the left, we kind of have your vegetables, okay, makes up kind of half your plate, okay. Your protein should make up about 30% of your plate, okay, and starch or your carbohydrates kind of making up the 20%, the other 20, okay. So that's kind of 100% of what you should be eating in a meal, okay. So obviously, I suppose if you are playing games, or if you are I suppose on a non-training day, this might fluctuate a little bit, but this is kind of generally what you should be looking at. So a protein source, okay, a carbohydrate source, some healthy fats in there as well. But yeah, look, your 3 to 4 meals a day, you should be kind of looking at this, okay. And we have it here on the right as well. So a portion control plate. So again, your half vegetables and salad, okay. A quarter of the plate, your good quality protein, and the other quarter is complex carbohydrates, okay. So instead of, like I said, giving you, I suppose, really specific recommendations, okay, these are kind of easy to follow, quite visual, okay, and easy for athletes, I suppose, and players to pick up on. So that's kind of what I would be targeting kind of youth players to be focusing on before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of it, okay. Okay, so I suppose hitting back on when our recovery process starts. So like I said, as soon as we get off the pitch or the gym, okay, that's kind of when our recovery window opens, okay. So I just kind of have, I suppose, some little tips on post-exercise nutrition here, okay. So the first one is, okay, getting in a carbohydrate source. So the reason we do this is to try and help replenish fuel stores, okay. So like I kind of hit on 2 slides ago, the main fuel source that we use during exercise is carbohydrates, okay. So obviously once we've done a pitch session, okay, or a game, or in the gym, okay, our fuel stores are going to be depleted, okay. So that's the priority, is to try and I suppose fill them back up before our next session, okay. So the next one is our protein source, okay. So that helps to promote muscle repair, okay. So obviously another huge one, you're going to probably suffer a significant amount of damage on your muscles or in your muscles, whether it be on the pitch or in the gym, okay. So quite important that we start healing them, and I suppose as soon as we can, and that kind of starts post-exercise, okay. And obviously you're going to lose quite a significant amount of sweat. Depending on the individual, some lose more than others, okay. So the next one there is to get a source of fluids and electrolytes to help rehydrate the body effectively, okay. So obviously that's going to be individual, but definitely important to look at the aspects of things as well. So just the last point there that I'm kind of making is just some easy to make and buy examples, okay. So the kind of ones I have here are, if you are doing, I suppose, like an evening session, some people might have a great appetite after games or trainings, okay, or if it's late in the evening, you obviously don't have something huge going to bed. So stuff like these, so like smoothies, flavor milks, fruit and yogurt, okay, so they're kind of hitting our three, okay. So our smoothies, we're hitting our carbohydrate source, our protein source, and we're getting fluids in. And same with the flavor milks, okay, really good. Our Muju or our Avamore protein milk, okay, you're hitting your carbohydrates, your sugars, good source of protein, and you're getting a half a liter, okay, 500 mils of fluids into you as well, okay. So really good and really practical just after sessions, okay. And then I suppose the last one there is fruit and yogurt, okay. So yeah, we're hitting the three, like I've touched on above. So really good, really simple ideas and quite practical and cheap to buy as well, okay. Okay, so that's kind of our nutrition side of things looked at, okay. And I suppose linking in with that is our hydration. So like I said, obviously during exercise, you lose quite a significant amount of water and sweat, okay? So obviously it's going to be individual. Some people lose more than others, okay? But yeah, these are kind of general guidelines, okay, for most people. And kind of once you nail the general kind of side of things, you can kind of get a little bit more specific, okay? So the first thing I have here is to kind of create a habit of drinking water, okay? So carry a water bottle with you, okay? The next one is to try and drink between 2 and 3 liters of water a day. So yeah, that's kind of depending on the individual. So that's kind of just general there, 2 to 3 liters of water a day. Obviously, if it's a hot day, you might need to drink a little bit more if you're sweating or anything like that. Okay, you're going to be losing a little bit more. Okay. Just what I have here is a way to monitor hydration. Okay, so look at the chart on the left. And that simply is just a urine color chart. Okay, so probably most of you have seen it before, and you probably know it yourself. If you have a urine color, I suppose of 8, 7, 6, okay, even 5, you know yourself that you're quite dehydrated. So what you're kind of aiming for is to look at your kind of 1, 2, 3, okay. If you're kind of that color, you know you're good enough, okay. So yeah, look, anytime you kind of go to the bathroom, just have a look. You'll know yourself, and just use it as a subtle reminder, okay, or to any of your players, okay. I need to get a little bit more water into me, okay. Straight after that, they go down, they get a glass of water in the kitchen or a bottle or whatever, okay. So yeah, just a kind of little subtle reminder. It's quite practical, okay. Everybody can do it, and there's no really excuses, okay. So yeah, just I suppose what I didn't touch on was what can happen if we aren't properly hydrated, okay. So dehydration can lead to reduced coordination, decision making, dizziness, headaches, weakness, okay. So we've probably all kind of suffered that at stages, okay, whether it be on playing sport or it could be after a night out or anything like that, okay. We've probably all been in a dehydrated state, and it's not kind of a good state, okay, whether that be during sport or even just your general day-to-day life, okay. So it is important to try and stay hydrated as best we can, okay. Okay, so we just covered our first main pillar, like I said there, okay. So the second one that I'm going to touch on here is sleep, okay. So like I said in the last one, it's one of the main pillars, okay, of recovery. There's research out here, okay, that says that less than 8 hours of sleep per night increases the likelihood of injury, okay. And that kind of every hour you take off, okay, that kind of spikes your chance of injury even more, okay. So if you're getting 3 or 4 or 5, okay, it's going to be really high, okay. So just here, depending on, I suppose most of us on the call are kind of youth coaches, okay. So it's looking here, teens need between 8 and 10 hours sleep a night, okay. While younger adults, okay, or I suppose getting to kind of minor there, probably need a little bit less, but still quite important, okay. So from 7 to 9 hours a night. So yeah, what I was going to hit on there is really practical, okay. It's not going to cost anything really to try and improve your sleep quality and your sleep hygiene and stuff like that, okay. It's all about, I suppose, creating good habits and just educating yourself a little bit more. But this is a really practical way of improving your recovery, and it's not going to cost a whole lot, okay. So yeah, just getting the appropriate amount of sleep a night will help players increase their performance, okay, and reduce the chance of injury and illness, okay. So yeah, like I said, our second main pillar, okay, quite cost effective and easy to improve on, okay. It's just about, I suppose, knowing how much we should be getting and kind of tips on how to improve our sleep, and that's what I'm going to hit on next there. Great. Okay, just I'll just hold up here for a second. If there's any questions, or if I'm going too fast, you can pop in a question into the box or anything like that. Okay. Just knowing there's not that much interaction so far. So lads, if you see anything, just give me a shout, or if you've any points to make, give me a shout there. So yeah, I'll just carry on. If there is anything, just give me a shout. So yeah, look, the next thing I have here is just tips for enhancing sleep. Okay, so like I said, these are really practical, okay, and kind of easy to implement. Okay, so the first one I have here is just creating a kind of a quiet, dark, cool room. Okay, so around 18 degrees Celsius. I know personally having a really, really hot room. Okay, it suppose depends on your situation at the house, but I know I've come in some nights and my housemates have had the heat blaring, and it's really, really uncomfortable to try and sleep in a room like that. So stuff that you can do, I suppose, if that is an issue, is to, I suppose, turn down your radiator, or even leave the window open for half an hour before you go to bed, okay? And that's going to, I suppose, leave it a little bit cooler. Make sure your curtains are pulled, I suppose, and there's no light sources in the room, like a phone beside your bed, or even a charger or a laptop left kind of on. It could be flashing throughout the night, and that can kind of disrupt you as well, okay? So yeah, a quiet, dark, cool room, okay, is going to give your best results, okay, and kind of get you into a deeper sleep quicker. So sleep routine is the second one I have, okay? So consistent wake and sleep time, okay? So I suppose what this is, I suppose, is going to bed roughly the same time every night and getting up roughly the same time, okay? If you're kind of fluctuating big time, okay, so you're going to bed at 9:30, 10 some nights, and you're 12 o'clock one other nights, okay, your body is going to be all over the place. So I suppose just trying to be consistent with your wake and sleep time is going to give really good results, okay, or a lot better than being all over the place. Just on our third one there, okay, so just being conscious of caffeine intake, okay. So yeah, this kind of depends on the individual too. I know some people, I know myself, I wouldn't kind of drink coffee after 5 p.m. and I know some people can drink it closer to bed, but that's kind of on the individual. But yeah, just be conscious, I suppose, not to be drinking caffeine too late in the evening, as that could have an effect when you're trying to go to sleep. Other things here as well, so food and fluid intake before bed, okay? So having a huge meal as well right before you go to bed probably isn't going to be great. That's kind of depends on the individual too, but yeah, it can lead to issues. And same with the fluid, okay? So you drink a lot of fluid before bed, you're probably going to have to get up in the middle of the night and go to the bathroom. That's going to break your sleep cycle as well, okay? So just be kind of conscious of those three things. Just on that point, I'm just kind of linking it back to the nutrition point that I made about our kind of snacks, okay? So if you are training or you're playing games late at night, okay, you could be training and you might get home till 9:30, 10, and you want to be careful of, I suppose, not having a huge meal before bed. Those snacks, I suppose, kind of play a part there where you're kind of getting in your fluids, your carbs, and your proteins, okay? And it's probably not going to upset your digestive system hugely either, okay? So yeah, that's, I suppose, the reason why I kind of threw in them easy to ingest meals there. So just on to the fourth one here, okay? So just aiming for at least 7 hours sleep, okay? So obviously depending on the individual and their age, some are going to need a little bit more, but I suppose 7 is kind of a good start point, and if you can increase it even to 7.5, 8, you're doing really well, okay? This one here, okay? So be conscious of screen time before bed. I say this is really a really prevalent one in a lot of people. I know personally I'm really bad for it. And that's, I suppose, just looking at screens or being on my phone before bed, okay? That kind of it emits blue light, okay? And some of you've probably heard of I've probably seen blue light blocking glasses and stuff like that advertised, okay? I suppose that the idea behind that is that the kind of blue light that you look at from your phone and your screen, it blocks melatonin, okay? So melatonin is a hormone that so it makes you drowsy and sleepy, okay? So obviously, if you're using something that's going to block that before you go to bed, it is going to have a knock-on effect, and it's going to take you longer to go to sleep at night, okay? So yeah, just, I suppose, having a cut-off point, whether it be half 8, 9, if you're going to bed at 11, that you put the TV, well, I suppose, the phone, I suppose, more so than anything, away. And look, there's ways, I suppose, like I said there, you can get blue light blocking glass and that. Now, I think the verdict is kind of out on that, but I won't ask anyone to go out and buy it. But yeah, just be conscious of the amount of screen time that you're looking at before you go to bed, okay? That's going to, I suppose, help the quality of sleep you get, and the faster you can go to sleep, okay? And just the last one, okay, is naps, okay? So naps can be of benefit. There's recommendations out there, okay? I suppose just kind of thinking not to nap too long would be one of my recommendations. So maybe like 20, 30 minutes, okay? If you go into too deep of a sleep, okay, it's probably going to disrupt your sleep that night, okay? So just be conscious of that. But yeah, naps can really be of benefit, okay? So that's kind of my tips there, okay? Okay. Yeah, so just I suppose this is kind of a good summary. And yeah, look, I'll just go through it. So this kind of hits on what we've been doing before, what we've looked at before. Okay, so our refueling and rehydrate kind of falls under our nutrition. Okay, and our repair and relax. Okay, that kind of falls into place with our sleep and everything else that we're going to touch on now. So just kind of an easy way to remember, our reminder says what we should be doing in order to try and get our recovery. Okay, so refuel, rehydrate. Okay, repair and relax. So once I suppose you're kind of hitting them four pretty well, okay, you're going to have quite a good result or outcome from your recovery. Okay. Okay. So, like I said, we've kind of covered our two main pillars or the kind of bulk of our important recovery stuff. Okay, so these are kind of some aspects or methods that you probably have seen before. Okay, but I'm not going to go into too much. I'll just touch on each of them. Okay. So yeah, like I said, you should be really focusing on the basics. Okay, so our sleep and nutrition and hydration first. Okay, and once we kind of have that nailed, and I suppose the older we get, we can kind of look at stuff like this. Okay, so the first one I have there is foam rolling and stretching. Okay. Secondly is active recovery. Okay, so yeah, really good one for the day after a game or training. It's not going to cost you anything, and it can help, I suppose. Uh, like the walking one there. Okay, that kind of builds in with our um the hours before there. Relaxing, sorry. So yeah, jogs and cycles there. I suppose just be conscious not to go too tough on the jogs and cycles as it is active recovery. Okay. Yeah, so cold water immersion. So that whether that be, I suppose, getting into an ice bath or into a lake or sea or something like that. Okay. That can be, I suppose, free if you're going into a lake or sea, or if you're going to an ice bath, it's probably going to cost you something as well. So compression booster garments. Okay, so I suppose specific areas might have this, or gyms or recovery zones will have, I suppose, compression boots. Garments, I suppose, can be purchased off sports shops or skins or anything like that. Okay, so yeah, just after that is the hot and cold therapy. And then the last one is our recovery systems. Okay, so 100-point recovery system. That's just something I'm going to touch on after this. Okay. But yeah, look, that's our kind of our other recovery methods. So you're probably all familiar with them. If any have any more questions or want any guidance or anything like that, don't be afraid to give me an email. I just have a question there. Okay, so do you do your foam rolling before or after static stretching? Um, yeah, I suppose the way I look at that is I'd probably do the foam rolling maybe in place of static stretching. Okay, I suppose that's kind of pre-game or pre-training. Okay, you just wouldn't want to go too excessive on the static stretching, as that might kind of have an effect on your performance. Okay, I suppose your muscles kind of have an elastic element. Okay, and if you kind of static stretch or stretch for too long, okay, that's probably gonna, I suppose, affect that elastic element of your muscle, and that might, I suppose, decrease maybe power output or some kind of something along those lines. Okay, so that can kind of hinder your performance. Okay, so yeah, just if I was to choose there or that, I would probably pick just the static stretching. Okay, or sorry, just the foam rolling. Okay, there's no issue doing the static stretching after maybe, but that's just kind of my personal view. So the foam rolling can be done, I suppose, pre-game or training, and it can be done on recovery days or even after if you find it of benefit. Okay, it's kind of going to come down to the individual a lot. Lads, I don't know if you have any opinions on that or what your thoughts are.
Yeah, no, as you said, the foam rolling, you take that as a replacement for the static stretching itself prior to your warm up, and your warm up would ideally be more dynamic rather than static. So you're kind of warming up and you're preparing the muscles in the joints while you're on the move, and kind of slowly building your body up, getting it ready for the training or the match that's coming up.
I would actually have a slightly different viewpoint in that. So say if we take this example as if it's a recovery day between sessions or something, I would go foam rolling, then static stretch. So I think, so the way you'd work it, your foam rolling is basically like giving yourself a massage or rolling out the muscles before they're getting rid of the kinks, and then stretch it afterwards. So if you are going from one to the other, foam roll first, stretch after.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I suppose I didn't look at it. I suppose I kind of picked the question up wrong, that it wasn't on a training day. But yeah, hopefully the two or three points there clears that up a little bit. If there's no other questions, I'll just flick on to my last couple of slides here, just on recovery systems. Okay, hopefully you can see that there. I just have two recovery systems, 100-point recovery systems they're called, that I picked up. These are just examples that I found, okay? I suppose the first time I would have come across it is the AFL, I suppose, were quite prevalent for using the 100-point recovery system. And it's something that I suppose I would use at club level and county level. And what it is pretty much is that, like we have here, is a number of different, I suppose, recovery methods, okay? And they all kind of have different point levels depending on, I suppose, what you want to prioritize. So you can see there, the one on the left, like your 30-minute massage is going to be 50 points, okay? A 20-minute nap is 50. 20 minutes of low intensity cardio, 30. Mobility is 30. Meditation is 20. The compression garments and the hot and cold contrast is 20 as well, okay? So what I suppose you're trying to do in the week is trying to hit 100 points, okay? So I suppose it's a way of trying to just build them up, okay, and try and get as much recovery as you can in. And once you're kind of getting close to the 100 or hitting the 100, okay, your recovery is going to be pretty good, okay, or spot on. So yeah, look, I just have two examples here, but I suppose it's going to be quite individual, okay? So if you have maybe, I suppose, younger athletes, what you'd want to be doing, I suppose, prioritizing depending on the group of players, okay, you have. So like I've been kind of preaching there is trying to hit our basics, okay? So our sleep and our nutrition and hydration, okay? So you kind of see here that the one on the right, 9 hours of sleep, gives 30 points, okay? A high GI and protein meal within 4 hours of exercise, okay, is 20, okay? So that's probably where you want to be prioritizing with, I suppose, younger athletes and more novice athletes, okay? And then you can kind of see down the bottom there that compression close is only 10, meditation is only 10, okay? So I suppose the more important recovery methods that you want to use, okay, the higher points that you're going to be using, okay? So yeah, look, what I'd say is maybe take note of a couple of these and some of the stuff that I've said already, and you can try and make your own one. So like I kind of said, maybe put your sleep and your nutrition, hydration stuff higher up the list, okay, with kind of 20, 30, 40 points, okay, and kind of put your foam roll and your stretch and massage and stuff like that maybe down around your 10 and 20, okay. And once they're able to kind of hit close enough to 100, they're doing pretty good in the week, okay. So if you want to give that a try, okay, if you kind of even go on and you can start, there'll be a couple of different examples as well. Give it a go, and if you want to get in contact with myself or Ian, we'll have a look at it and see what our thoughts are and if we could adjust it or if you think it's good, okay? So yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to us if you want. Okay, Ian, if you want to flick on. Grand, okay, so that is the recovery side of things covered, okay? If there's any questions there, don't be afraid to type it in or shout. If not, Ian, you can get going.
Yeah, that's spot on. I'm just conscious of time, guys, so I am gonna go and continue straight on. But if you do have any questions, throw them in the chat, and we'll try and answer them as quick as we can. Okay. So James has gone through quite a bit on kind of recovery and some recovery strategies that you could use. So next section we're going to talk about here is load monitoring. So this is basically talking about our training load and how we can monitor this. So before we go into it anymore, why do we need to monitor our training load? I'm going to put that out to the floor and I'll give you guys a minute or a minute and a half to see if you can think of any reasons why we need to monitor our training load. I'll give you the tip. A lot of the stuff was mentioned by James already. You can see a couple of answers. Prevent fatigue, yeah. Development. Avoid player burnout. That's very important. We'll touch on that as well. Very good. Avoid injury, muscle fatigue, and tightness. Case of injury, case players are doing too much, yeah. Dual player, exactly. That's where this is extremely important, because if you're a dual player and you're playing both sports, hurling, football, camogie, whatever it may be, you're going to have to be much more careful with your actual training load. And look, that can be that can be something that's difficult to manage as well, especially if you have players, for example, who don't just play GA, they don't just play hurling and football or camogie, they might play another sport. Maybe they play basketball, maybe they play tennis, maybe they play soccer. And it's not always the case where, well, it's very rarely the case that managers of different teams from different sports are in contact with each other regarding a player who plays with both teams. So that's a very important point about dual players. Okay. Very good, guys. So as you can see, a lot of the answers were pretty much covered by James's question at the start of this presentation as well. So when we're talking about recovery, it kind of ties right in with monitoring our training load as well. Sorry. Okay, so this is just kind of an example of how that might come into play. So we can see a preparatory period, transition period, a competition period, and that's kind of given an example of how our season might play out. So preparatory period is basically our pre-season, and ideally at the start of a pre-season, your volume of training is going to be high. So that's kind of your duration or how much you're actually doing, and the intensity is, the quality, like how difficult are players finding it. And as you can see, as you progress through the season, volume generally will start to go down and intensity will go up. And we can see as well technique. So initially around pre-season, there's usually less emphasis on technique. You're more so trying to get the body ready physically for the coming season, and then technique generally goes up alongside intensity. By the time you're hitting your competition period and trying to hit your peak, the main focus is going to be on technique and intensity with a lower volume. Okay, so we did have a presentation previously talking about this in more detail, but this is a term some of you may or may not be aware of, and it's periodization. And as much as it looks like just a fancy word, it is a basic concept. Essentially, it's just a long-term plan for training. Like, it's a long-term schedule, and the main aim of it is to achieve peak performance at the most optimal time. So what can often happen is teams can be in tip-top shape, maybe in the middle of the season, maybe they're only halfway through the league and championship hasn't hit full flow yet, and they could be doing fantastic in the league, and they may have hit their peak at that stage. But what can often happen there is it's very, very difficult to stay at your peak for a prolonged period of time. By the time championship comes around, then you may have lost that peak performance. You may have gone down a bit. That's something to be aware of. So periodization is all about planning long term to try and avoid that happening and try and make sure you reach your peak performance at the most optimal time. Okay, so the next slide is just kind of giving you an idea of the cycle we go through when we talk about fitness and training. So there's kind of 4 steps involved in this. The first one is the initial baseline. This is where your initial fitness level is. So you always start at your initial baseline. The next step is taking part in your actual training or your game. So while you're training, your level of fitness actually decreases as you go on. And by the time you hit the end of your training, you should be in a less fit state than when you began. So that's the second step. Third step, which was the main area that James was covering in the first half of this presentation, is recovery. So you're going to need to be recovering after training. Your body enters this period, and you've got to try and help your body to respond to the workout that it's just been involved in. So while you're recovering, as long as you kind of engage in your recovery and use the proper techniques and give yourself enough time, you're hoping that your level of fitness will actually increase back up to the initial baseline fitness level at the very, very least. But that takes us on to step 4, which is the ideal scenario when you're trying to improve fitness, and that's called supercompensation. Some of you may have heard that term before, some of you may not. This is essentially when your body is actually at a higher level of fitness than it was at your initial baseline. So you start off with the initial baseline. By the time you get to step 4 or stage 4, which is supercompensation, your body has actually increased its level of fitness, and that's as a response to the training that you've just engaged in previously, as long as you've engaged in adequate recovery as well. So that's essentially what you're hoping to happen when you train. You're hoping to push yourself a little bit, and your body is basically reacting to the difficulty that it went through, and it's trying to increase its level of fitness to be able to deal with kind of a similar level or similar training session in the future. Okay, so there are 4 steps, and the next slide is just going to kind of give you an idea of how that looks on a graph. So as you can see, the current level of fitness, or a baseline, you can see that it starts off as just a horizontal line, and that's the fitness we have prior to our training. As you can see, when we actually do the training itself, that line starts to decrease, it starts to go down. By the time you're getting to the very bottom of that loop, that's when your training has ended. That's when fatigue sets in. So you're actually going down to a lower level of fitness to what you were before you started training. Next, we see our recovery stage. So our recovery stage, as you can see, starts to go back up and heads back up towards the baseline level of fitness. And it actually ends up going above the baseline level of fitness, and that's where you get your kind of your fitness gain, and you enter your super compensation zone. And as you can see at the bottom, you don't know. It's a lot of it comes down to how long you have between. Obviously, you have your recovery methods that you have to worry about as well, but a lot of it comes down to the time that you have between training sessions. Okay, so just a little bit more on super compensation and another graph to demonstrate this. So we can see our blue line that's going horizontally across the screen as our baseline level of fitness. The red line will demonstrate what you'd ideally hope for. So again, you've got the decreasing line as you train, and then you can see it starts to rise up again. It goes back up to the baseline level of fitness, and that little zone between the red line where we say super compensation and the blue line, you are ideally hoping that you can have your next training session somewhere in that zone where your level of fitness is actually higher than it previously was. As we can see, our purple line is just kind of demonstrating what can happen if you don't provide enough recovery time or enough time between your sessions so you can actually be prepared for the next training session. So as you can see, you have your next training session and you haven't even gotten back up to your baseline level of fitness. And if you continue to do this, as you can see, that purple line is just going to keep going down. Your level of fitness is going down. You're suffering from fatigue, drop in fitness, and ultimately you're putting yourself at a very high risk of burnout. Okay. So this next graph just kind of gives another illustration of the optimal outcome that you're looking for. So if you see, just the black dots are kind of when you actually have your training. So as you can see, it starts off at the baseline level of fitness, the red line again. And as you go up there, you can see that all the training sessions are had at the correct time. And as you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 training sessions, and each time the level of fitness is going up and up and up, and that's going to be very important for performance as well. Okay, so just a few terms that we're going to go through as well, where we're going to talk about what happens if you don't have the correct recovery time in between. So first of all, first term we have is overloading, and this essentially is an increased training load as fitness improves. So you can imagine, if you look down at the graph below, we've got 6 sessions there, and that's again illustrating what happens if you do time your training sessions correctly. As you can see, the line starts rising, and in order to do that, you need to do what's called overloading, and that's essentially, as your fitness level increases, your training load needs to increase slightly as well, because if you keep your training load the same, you're just going to have a plateau. Your line's going to just stay straight horizontal. You're not necessarily going to lose a level of fitness or you lose any of your fitness, but you're not really going to gain anything either, because your body has essentially prepared itself for that particular training session, and it's not responding, or it's not having as much difficulty as it was previously. And once it's not challenged, it's not going to, like, your body's not going to react the same way. It's not going to get itself ready for an even higher standard or even higher training load. So overloading is increasing your training load as your fitness improves. So session 1 wouldn't necessarily, or session 1 wouldn't have the same training load as session 2. Session 2 would ideally have a slightly higher training load, and the same as you go up to session 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. Okay. Overtraining, which is what we showed back in this graph here, which is the purple line. So overtraining is when you have a lack of recovery time between sessions. So that's when you're not letting your body recover, you're not letting the repair, the muscle repair and the rebuilding to happen, and you're having your next training session and you're at a lower level of fitness than your baseline. So you're going the complete opposite way. And then detraining, another term which is kind of the opposite, and it's not as common as overtraining. And this essentially happens when there's too much recovery time between sessions. So essentially what's happened there is you have gone into your super compensation zone, you've given enough time, but by the time you have your next training session, you've actually, your baseline or your level of fitness has actually gone back down below the baseline level of fitness. So it's not as common as overtraining, but it is something to be aware of as well. And this next graph is going to kind of show what happens with both of them. So on the left, we can see detraining, again with the black dots, show when you've actually had your training session. So as you can see, you've had the decrease during the training session, and as you go up, you're in your compensation zone. But then there's a long period of time before you actually have your next training session. And as you can see, you've gone down below the baseline level of fitness. And that is something that you have to be very careful of as well. You can have such thing as too much recovery. So it is something to be aware of. But as I said, it is not near as common as overtraining. And then on the right-hand side, it's another example of what can happen with overtraining. So again, the black dots represent when you have your training session. You have your line going down, decreasing, and then you can see it starts to rise back up. But unfortunately, the next training session has occurred before you've been able to get back to the baseline level of fitness or back above the baseline level of fitness. And if you can see the dotted lines are kind of showing what you'd be hoping for. Like you'd be hoping for your recovery to go up above the baseline if possible. But as you can see, in this case, if a player is doing the training sessions as seen here, they're completely losing their level of fitness and they're starting to put themselves at risk for burnout. Okay, just a reminder, guys, if you do have any questions on this, don't be afraid to throw it into the chat. And lads, if you do have see any questions coming in, just give me a shout. Okay, so the next section here, just kind of give you an idea of how to look out for overtraining and how to spot it. And there are a number of ways that that you can do this. We're not going to go through all of them because not all of them are going to be as easy to see. So performance will be one of the main ones, of course. So a decreased level of performance is something that you need to be aware of. But obviously you do need to be aware that a decreased level of performance is actually necessary when it comes to overreaching, or which is that's kind of hitting your overtraining as well. So you need to be careful. Or if you keep an eye on the performance, if you see a dip in performance, there is a chance that they may be suffering from overtraining. And then fatigue, same thing again. If you're talking to your player, if they're complaining about chronic soreness in their muscles, they're starting to get tired very early in the game. They don't feel like they're able to do as much as they were maybe 2-3 weeks ago. They might not feel as strong. They might not feel as powerful or as fast. That's something to look out for as well. Physiology and immune function there, as James mentioned earlier, your immune function can actually be affected by overtraining, and you could start getting colds or flus pretty easily. And then physiology, not something that we'd be monitoring a whole lot, but I see a lot of players these days would have maybe Fitbits or different ways to kind of monitor their heart rate. So it could be an increase in their resting heart rate or an increase in their sleeping heart rate as well. Could be getting heart palpitations, stuff like that. Mood is another thing that we don't often think about, but again, that can kind of come with fatigue. Could be a loss of motivation. There could be less enthusiastic about going to training, about going to play matches. They could be more irritable. They could have a much shorter temper. There are a lot of things to look out for as well. Blood, obviously, it's not something that you're going to be able to keep an eye on very easily. Sleep is another thing. So if you're suffering from overtraining, you could have disturbed sleep, or you could have insomnia where you're not able to get to sleep. You can't, or even when you do get to sleep, you feel like you're waking up and you're getting disturbed sleep quite a lot. Another thing, the last one there is just gastrointestinal. You could have excessive weight loss. You could have a loss of your appetite, absence of menstruation when it comes to female players, or you could have constipation or diarrhea. So they're just some of the symptoms of overtraining that you can look out for. But obviously, as a coach, the main ones that you'd probably be looking out for would be performance, fatigue, and mood. And then when you're talking to your players, you can obviously ask them what's the story with their sleep. How are they getting on? Are they getting enough sleep? Are they having a good sleep? Stuff like that. Okay.
There's a question in there, Ian. Kevin asked, what would be the average time needed for recovery after a game or hard workout?
It's a good question, and it's quite a difficult one to answer because that really depends on the individual. Like everyone is different. There's there's also a different when it comes to training and games. Like there could be different intensities. So you take, for example, you might play a championship match, and usually people would associate championship matches with being a lot more intense than a league match, because championship is usually taken a bit more seriously. So a championship match against one team might require a bit more recovery compared to another one, if that makes any sense. I don't know if you lads want to jump in there or give your opinions on that.
Yeah, I suppose it is very dependent on the individuals, and there probably is no, I suppose, average guidelines on it. But yeah, in terms of a training schedule, like if you're, let's say, training on a Tuesday, Friday, Sunday, you might put your hard session on a Tuesday, and then you can have your biggest window of recovery. So you have your Wednesday, Thursday, and then half the day Friday before you go back on Friday night for your second session. So, yeah, like there's hard to kind of put guidelines on it, but like I suppose for maybe a really hard game or a tough session, maybe like 48 hours probably would be around it, I think. There is kind of no real, I suppose, specific guidelines, but yeah, I suppose just trying to basis off your knowledge and your previous I suppose what you've done before with the teams and what's worked well. So yeah, just trying to get to know your panel, I suppose, and the players and individuals. So yeah, I don't know, Ian.
Yeah, I suppose a big key to it as well would be communication with the players themselves. So obviously, you'd hope that they'd be able to engage in adequate recovery themselves. So maybe they might use the 100-point recovery system. But if they are, or if you are trying to figure out what's the best time, or what's the best amount of time to get between a game and then their next training session or hard workout, you'd be more inclined to maybe try and get some feedback from your players themselves. Ask them how they're feeling. Ask them how do they feel like they've recovered well, or are they still getting soreness in their muscles. So that'd be something else to do as well.
Yeah, it's going to kind of come under a little bit of trial and error, isn't it? Like if it doesn't work the first time, okay, maybe give an extra day the next time, or if it did work the first time, try it again and see.
Yeah, great question, Kevin. Thanks for that. Okay, so moving on from the symptoms of overtraining, we're going to talk next about some of the challenges you might have when it comes to managing your training load. Okay, so the first one here: excessive and inappropriate schedules of training and games, usually with numerous teams in multiple competitions. So I did touch on that earlier on. So you could have a player, depending on what age he is, he could be playing with his club at multiple age groups. He could be playing with his college or his school. He could be on a county team, and then again, you've also got other sports that they may be involved with. They could be doing athletics, basketball, rugby, tennis, soccer. So that's one big challenge, and as I mentioned earlier, it's especially difficult because they want to play as much as they can. They want to play everything, but there's usually a lack of, if any, communication between coaches of different teams and different sports. Next point there: training several times a week, sometimes more than once a day. Okay, so that can happen with college, and it can happen with school. There may be, let's say, on a Tuesday, they may have a school game on the Tuesday afternoon or even Tuesday morning, and then that evening they may have training with either their club, or if they're playing county, or if they're playing another sport like football. That is something that you need to be aware of as well. Third point here is playing a number of competitive games every week, and sometimes 2 games in one day, and that's kind of what I mentioned there earlier. Similar as I said, you could have a school game during the day on a Thursday, and then that evening you might have a game for your club as well. Next point is different types and formats of training with a number of teams in different phases of the training cycle and competitive season. So I suppose, me personally, not having played soccer in a while, but as far as I recall, usually the soccer season is quite different from the football season. Soccer is often played during the winter months, while football usually, Gaelic football and hurling and such, usually aren't. So again, you could be at different phases. So if you remember the graph I was talking about earlier, where at the start of our kind of pre-season phase, our training load is, our training volume is high, but our intensity is low. So you could be maybe just starting the soccer season, and your soccer coach may be kind of taking it easy, like as in kind of longer training sessions with less intensity. But at the same time, you could be at crunch time with your Gaelic football or your hurling team or your camogie team. where you could be at the competition phase where you're looking to gain peak performance. So there can be a difficulty there when there's contrast in types of training. Obviously, improper training techniques. If you're not doing the correct training, then that's obviously a problem as well. And the last one, I believe, communication between managers and coaches, and that's I've mentioned that a couple of times on this in this presentation. When we're talking about managers of different teams, or different age groups, or different sports, there's nearly always a lack of communication or any communication whatsoever between managers and coaches. They might not be aware that their player is playing other sports, or they may not be aware of like the level of training they're doing. So that's a very big challenge when it comes to managing training load for your players.
Ian, there's just a question in there. Do you include a deload week in your training?
Do you include a deload week in your training? That kind of depends as well. It can depend on the schedule. So if you've got if you're kind of in the period of time where you have league matches, so you'd often have league matches every week or maybe every 2 weeks, you may not actually have the time to have a kind of a deload session. So you may just try and kind of get your next trainer session after a league game. Could be maybe a lighter one just to kind of loosen the legs out, and then the next training session after that, before your next game, might be kind of getting yourself ready for that. Championship, you're kind of probably have more scope for a bit of recovery time or a deload, where you can kind of just kind of take it a bit more easy. I hope that answers the question. I don't know if you've anything else to say on that, James or Ian.
Yeah, it's tricky, I suppose, especially in terms of hurling and football, when there's kind of constant peaks and you kind of have to be, I suppose, trying to peak week in, week out, or I suppose towards championship time specifically. But whether it be kind of early season or pre-season, maybe just like we kind of touched on a good bit, was just kind of communicating with your players and just talking to them and seeing how they feel. You know, it might be pre-season, they've done it hard 5-6 weeks, and maybe the players are starting to feel they're starting to struggle. They're feeling kind of bit. They maybe need a kind of week of lower intensity, lower kind of volume stuff, and that might do them the world of good. But if it's a case that they're feeling good, the majority of them are still good, there probably would be no need. So yeah, I think what you touched on was pretty good there, and I suppose just trying to know your players and chat with them, and kind of get to see what the feeling is. I suppose it's going to be individual and specific to every player and team. So
yeah. Spot on. Cheers, James. Another brilliant question. Thanks very much for that. So we're going to actually go on to a kind of a way that you can actually try and figure out how to deal with your workload. So again, I don't know if this is something anyone has seen, but this is the Borg RPE scale. So the original one actually ranged from 6 to 20, but it's okay to modify it and use a kind of different version here, which is 0 to 10. So you classify at 0 as like you're at rest, 1 is very, very easy. By the time you're getting up to 10, you're at maximum. It's very rare that you get something back or someone become back saying 10, because that's basically when you're pushing yourself to your absolute limits and you're at your max heart rate. So a technique that we can use to actually calculate training load is to use this RPE scale, and depending on what you get on that scale, let's say you get 4 or 5, sorry, if you get 5 and then your training session was 60 minutes, so if you multiply 5 by 60, you get 300 arbitrary units. So that can count as our training load. So our training load is 300 arbitrary units, and we're going to go into a bit more detail on that now. So this table is just kind of an example of how you can kind of work out someone's training load. So as you can see, on Monday they've got a weights and strength session along with a speed session. So the RPE scale is 4 for both of them. So 4 by 45 is 180, 4 by 30 is 120. Combine them together for your daily total, which is 300. And as you can see, throughout the week, you've got they've got rugby training, you've got weights training, conditioning, you've got a couple of rest days there on Friday and Sunday as well. So once you add up your weekly training load, you've got 1,915 units, and it can be difficult to figure out how many arbitrary units of a training load you should be doing in a week. But a good indicator of that would be if your sessions are starting, or if your RPE readings from your players are starting to go up. Maybe there's too many of them up at 6, 7, 8. That could be an indicator that you're actually they're actually kind of finding things difficult, especially if it's especially if your session isn't necessarily that long and you don't feel like it's actually that intense, but they may feel intense for them, and that could be a sign that they're suffering from sorry, my head's gone. Drawing a blank here. Overtraining. So yeah, that's just kind of an example of how you might actually have a kind of a spreadsheet, and there is a spreadsheet. I don't have it included in this presentation, but I'll have it open and I'll show it to you at the end of this presentation. And if anyone wants to make use of it, you can contact myself or James, and we'll make sure to send it on to you. But yeah, that's kind of how you might actually see someone's week planning out. So the next thing we're going to talk about is something called acute chronic workload ratio. Okay, so we talk about our acute workload, and that's our workload performed by an athlete in 1 week. So like that's your 7 days that we just looked at in the previous slide. So it's usually our main indicator when it comes to finding out if an athlete is fatigued or not. When we talk about our chronic workload, that's the average acute workload over the previous 4 weeks or 28 days, and that's kind of an indicator of the athlete's fitness. So in your 28 days, you've obviously got four numbers for your acute workload. We'll go through them now in a second. So quick example, if an athlete has a weekly average consisting of the following. So week 1, there's 1,600 arbitrary units. Week 2, we've got 1,200. Week 3, we've got 1,800, and week 4, we've got 1,400. So what you do, it's very simple. You've got 4 weeks and four numbers to work with. So you add all of them together. So add 1,600, 1,200, 1,800, and 1,400 together, and divide it by 4, as there's 4 weeks, and you get your average of 1,500. So that is your that's what's deemed to be your chronic workload over those 4 weeks. And the figures at week 1, 2, 3, and 4, they'd be individually your acute workload for those weeks. Okay. So how you get your acute chronic workload ratio is you take whatever week you pick one of your weeks. So you might have week 4, for example, which is 1,400, and you divide it by your chronic workload or your average over those 4 weeks, which is 1,500. So as you can see, we do that figure there, and we can see we get 0.93. Okay, and when we're talking about acute chronic workload, it's generally thought that the average or the range that you want to be in should be between 0.8 to 1.3. So if you're outside of that range, there's either too much training going on or there's not enough. And it's very important to get that optimal kind of level of training for a number of reasons. So if we just look at this slide here, we're just coming up to the end of the presentation. This is kind of the last thing to kind of cover. So we can see our range at the bottom. So we've got 0.50, and then it goes up to 1, 1.5, and 2. So if we can see in the green area, that should be between our 0.8 and our 1.3, and that's what we call our sweet spot. That's where we're actually at the least risk of developing injuries during in that zone there. So that's ideally what you're looking for. If you're going a bit lower, your body's not actually prepared for the games or the training sessions that they're about to do, and as you can see, the likelihood of getting an injury is actually higher than it is in the green zone or the sweet spot. If you're going past 1.5, you're actually starting to go into the danger zone. As you can see, that line starts to curve up quite rapidly, and you're starting to experience a much higher chance. A much higher chance of developing an injury during training or during a game. So that's something to be very aware of. Just going back to like how can you figure out how whether players are suffering from fatigue or whatsoever. There may be scope to do some kind of a questionnaire, and that may just be a verbal thing. You may not actually have something out on a spreadsheet or a page. It could be just as simple as going over and talking to your players before and after a training session. So you could come up to them before the training session, ask them how they're feeling after the previous game or training session, whatever they just had. Ask them if they've been doing anything else, if they've been playing with any other teams, just to kind of get an idea. And that's very important. That's kind of where you're getting your feedback from players, because again, I can't hammer home this point enough. every player is individual. Like no one's going to be reacting the exact same to training. Everyone is unique. And then similar enough after training, when we talk about the RPE scale and asking the players on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being you're at rest and 10 being you're giving your absolute maximal effort. How difficult did you find this training session? The key time for that would be to not ask them where they are on the scale directly after they've finished their training session. So like they might be just after finishing their last little bit. Not ideal to go over and actually ask them there and then, because their heart rate's high. They're still kind of trying to get their heart rate down and kind of recover a little bit from the training they've just done, and it might affect what they tell you. They might feel like they're up at 8 or 9, but once you give them 5-10 minutes to actually kind of let themselves come back down, get the heart rate back down, then they can give a more accurate reading there. Okay, so it could be a verbal questionnaire, as I said, where you just ask them the RPE scale 5-10 minutes after, ask them how they're feeling, ask them if their muscles are tight, if they feel like there's anything niggling at them or anything like that. Okay. And this is a slide that Teresa, I think Teresa's here, showed us last week, and I think it's fantastic because we've all heard of the phrase "go hard or go home," but this is really the way you should be doing it. It's go hard, but know when to go home. It's going to do you no good to, like, obviously we all want to work hard. Like if you're playing in a sport, you often have players who they want to be the best or they want to make it onto their county team, and they might have it in their head that they just have to train harder, like much harder than everyone else. But at the same time, if you're not giving yourself the correct recovery, you're not going to be able to reach that. You're actually going to go the opposite way. Your fitness is going to go down. So I think this is a fantastic little image here. Go hard and know when to go home. Know when to get your recovery time in. Okay. Okay, guys, that's bringing us to the end of this presentation. Look, thanks very much for the engagement we've had so far. If you have any more questions that you want to ask, we'll hold on for another couple of minutes. Also, as you can see on the screen, we've got our contact information. So we've got an email and a number for both of us. So if you have any questions now and you don't feel comfortable asking them in the chat, or if you have any questions at a later date, maybe our contact details are on the screen there, and you can feel free to contact us, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as we can. Do you have anything else to add, James?
No, I think we're good.
Good stuff. Okay, guys, listen, thanks very much for being here. We've really enjoyed delivering the Roadshow webinars over the last few months, and we've been getting some fantastic engagement. So thanks very much for that, guys. And I hope this has been informative. I hope you've been able to take something away from this.
Thanks very much.
Cheers.
No problem, Brian. Thanks a million.